Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Triathlon Physio. Now, today's topic is the sporting spine. So, how many of you have had a bad back when you're running, when you're biking or swimming, or across all three? And whatever you do, stretching wise, foam roller wise, you just can't get rid of it. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the reasons why we get back pain, the mechanisms and the kind of underlying pathology, and then how do we manage it or resolve it at best. So the next part of the video, we're going to look at all those different factors, and hopefully I can give you some tips of wisdom of how you can self-manage your own back. So, the sporting spine. Now that could be lower back, that could be the neck, that could be the mid back. All of these different segments are loaded at different points depending on what sport we do, and that's taking it out of the triathlon context. It really doesn't matter what the sport is. As a good physio, a good sports physio, we should be able to look at the loads required, the capacity, and determine why that area of the spine is becoming painful. So let's just look at the common things that we get with, say, on the bike first. So on the bike, we're in a relatively flexed position over the bars, whether we're in TT or whether we're in road bike position. And there's a number of factors here that really need addressing. So obviously being bike fitted is important, but I think what's more important is looking at what is required and the duration of the requirement, rather than trying to fit the bike to maybe an under conditioned back or body on the bike. And that's very, very common. You know, people spend 300, 400, 500 pounds for a bike fit, and it might get rid of their problem, but it may not. And that's because they're not being bike fitted by maybe a qualified physiotherapist and someone who is just looking at angles and how they can make you efficient. Many people don't do it looking at power. So you've always got to look at the ability to weigh up power increase versus aero, and whether or not the more aero you get, actually the more power deficient you get. So all these factors are very broad and are very difficult to cover in one topic. So we'll just look at a general overview of the back on the spot or the bike on the spine. I keep looking to my right because I've got my TT bike set up here. So I suffer with my back on the bike, not because necessarily my position is bad, but mainly because my spine isn't used to long periods of cycling. And that's because of a background of swimming where my spine is typically in an extended position with an element of rotational control required, and then going into cycling where your spine is required to then be in control in a flex position. So I know if I do conditioning work and I look at some mobility, that I can actually resolve my problem pretty quick. If I leave my conditioning, get off the bike for a few months and go back on, the problem comes back because again, you kind of regress back to what is your general state of body, of what is your learnt behaviour as such. So on the bike, the biggest thing we see are obviously for a lot of the pros is disc problems in your back, causing maybe leg pain, causing just general back pain. Obviously you have facet joints that slide either side, and you have soft tissue. So they're your general causes of back pain, either one or multiple cases. Now the biggest thing we see for cycling is the fact that people can't control their spine once they fatigue. Now that may be half an hour in, or whatever the distance is. But as soon as they fatigue, their spine flexes more, they tend to use their quads more, which again pulls them even further into flexion. And that is typically down to weak glutes and a weak phase of cycling through the whole circle of the foot motion. Now this is again down to people's own deficits, how they use their body in day-to-day life. Someone who's very quad dominant, again it's a learned trait, so it doesn't mean you can't unlearn it, but it's about technical ability on the bike, how you're driving, how you're recruiting muscles. So bike fits are great, but I think you need to bear in mind that actually they have their limits. What is more effective, and what we've done with a lot of people, is looking at their ability to control spinal motion and hip stability whilst we put them under duress in the gym. and that may be looking at specific particular movement patterns, but making it very functional to the bike position. So there's not much functional gain in doing a standing based assessment because you're not in standing when you are on the bike. So we can take people through a screening process. We can look at left and right bias, we can look at front and back bias, and we can then determine where or not that person is weak. Now once we've found where that person is weak, what we'll then do is we'll prescribe a program that will address those situations, and then what we should find in time, and this is not a quick fix by any means, but we should find that the period of time you go before your back pain comes on or your performance level drops will increase to the point where hopefully we can get you pain-free for the complete duration of your bike segment, whether that's Olympic, sprint, half Ironman or even Ironman. Now that ricochets through the whole of any sport. Is your spine able to cope with the demands of the activity? It is no more simple than that. So with cycling, with running, with swimming, we look at all of those things. Now the other thing we know with each of those sports is that you will use certain muscle groups more than others. So in all three of those, your hip flexors can become over dominant or even over fatigued. Now that will alter your spinal position or your ability to flex or extend, and that can then develop into a back problem. Obviously with tight hip flexors, we know that that inhibits your glutes. And if your glutes don't work, you're not driving through that extension phase and you're recruiting other muscles to try and do the work for you. Again, compounding the effect on the spine and everything else. So what we'll look in the next few videos is how do we screen people? How do we then progress them from screening to rehab? And how can we make your general performance and your body pain-free? So like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That will give you updates on when these videos are released. And what we'll do is for each of those independent sports is we'll look at how do we screen for a swimmer, how do we screen for a cyclist and a runner, and then specifically look at how can we make you sport specific strong. And if we do that, your performance will sail, you'll get off the bike after how long and you'll feel loose. You won't have the fatigue or the time where you're kind of trying to arch up and stretch and get over the aches and pains. But as athletes, we all deal with aches and pains. We kind of put up with it. But they are normally the telltale signs that something isn't coping. So until our next video, have a great day, get that training going. I'm just about off for a run, and we'll speak again soon.